In the 1960s, BMW's marketing men spotted a gap in the market. More people in Europe had more money in their pockets, which was great for a car company that had decided that luxury cars were in their future. But not everyone wanted a big brute of a car. There were quite a few people that wanted something that was a little easier to park, so after a great deal of thinking and hammering, they launched the O2 series in 1966. Job done, and they were right. There were over 800,000 people who went out and bought one over its 11-year life. The next version was renamed the 3 Series, and the rest is history. But there was one particular model that became iconic, the 2-litre version that BMW dubbed the 2002. It wasn't just its more powerful engine, which was further enhanced with a TII injection model and the rare but much sought after turbo. It was the handling and also the beautiful shape that drew BMW fans to painstaking work to restore them and keep them on the road. Steve Saxty has been given unprecedented access to BMW to tell their story through a series of books, and he's let me pluck this one from BMW's Hidden Gems, the story of how BMW created a reimagining of the 2002. So, with Steve's help, here's the story of BMW's 2002 for the year 2002. The 02 series was swept away in the mid-1970s with a whole-scale BMW renumbering system that they still use today. The replacement will be known as the 3 Series, with the larger saloons titled the 5 and the 7 Series. Even-numbered cars will be 2-door Grand Tourers. The 3 Series was such a runaway success that the 2002 model number was lost to time. That was until the mid-1990s. Andreas Zapatina studied car design in California, graduating in 1986. From there he worked for Fiat, where he was lucky enough to work on the Fiat Barchetta. It was there where he met Chris Bangle. Chris switched to BMW in 1992 and Andreas tagged along. Although he's had a love for Italian cars, BMWs, and the 2002 in particular, have been in his blood for a long time.
So Andreas Zapatinas, for those that are Alfa fans, later became the head of design for Alfa Romeo. But before that, he was at BMW, and he's a Greek gentleman who had a 2002 when he was studying in New York. So he moved to the US and had a 2002. So he's always had this love of 2002s, and he even owns one today. Now he's retired. He's actually got the 2002 in his garage.
Like the 02 series opened up a market for smaller luxury cars, BMW felt they needed something smaller than the 3 Series, so they launched the 3 Series Compact in 1994, a shortened version of the existing 3 Series. But with the engine mounted longitudinally, there was a lot of bonnet and not a lot of space for people. It sold well in Europe, but it wasn't a hit in the USA. Andreas played around with the design of a next-generation 3 Series Compact, and an idea hit him.
But it was Andreas who absolutely thought, well, hang on, we've got the year 2002 coming up, and this is when this vehicle will be launched. Why don't we make it a 2002 for the year 2002? And he scrawled on some of his drawings 2K2, so it was 2K2 for 2002. Something.
Americans love sedans, so this shape would work much better than the 3 Series Compact with its hatchback. And it was a shape that gave a subtle nod back to the 2002 that every kid had wanted back in the day, and as adults could now finally buy in the year 2002. BMW didn't pick up his new design though. It didn't fit in with the family look that they were going for. The new BMW 3 Series, and indeed the new 3 Series Compact, would wear a more conventional design. Another person who had thoughts of a new BMW 2002 was Ralph Langmuir. He was working on new ways to use computer-aided design and was looking to test his ideas on something real. Ralph also hit on the idea of a 2002 in 2002. Like Andreas, he had a history with the original car as well.
But Ralph Langmuir, who's an engineer, also had and still has a 2002 as well. All these people have 2002s at BMW. And his is a very rare Bauer convertible, so he's particularly proud of that. Ralph is now a very senior engineer at Rolls-Royce, but back in the day there, he was studying advanced composite materials. And he had heard that somebody in design had sketched a 2002 looking car. And he thought, wouldn't it be cool if I could make a running vehicle that is using composite technology to strip down a 3 Series and turn it into a running 2K2 type 2002 style vehicle.
Ralph had heard of Andreas's 2002 design and suggested that that was used, but Chris Spangle teamed him up with Thomas Plath to create a new shape. You may remember Thomas from his time working on a new Ford Capri in the 1980s when I made that video about failed Ford Capri reboots. But by the 90s he was firmly ensconced at BMW, heading up interior design. The starting point was the 3 Series Coupe from the brand new 1997 model. Thomas created a new shape inspired by Andreas's design. The team created a full-size mock-up using a new technique, milling the shape out of foam. In just 4 weeks they had something to show, and they found a good place to present it. The board was getting an update on the new 7 Series, so during that design review the team drove in their new creation, just like Apple's "just one more thing" moment. The board was suitably impressed at that initiative and gave the go-ahead to produce a running prototype of what one marketing person had dubbed the 2K2. This prototype had to be done right. The team set themselves a 1,000 kilo weight limit to ensure that, like the original 2002, this was a pure driver's car. It also had to be done on a tight budget. Thankfully, they had the right man for the job.
In BMW circles, there's a man called Max Riesbock, who is just a legend in the sort of nerdy side of the history of BMW, where he built the first 3 Series station wagon at home. So he was a prototype builder, and he wanted a station wagon, but BMW didn't make a 3 Series station wagon, so he built it at home. And it was so well liked that the company bought it off and put it into production. So Max, although he's famous for that, did actually have a day job building prototypes. So Ralph Langmeier and the designer that took over the advanced side of design, Thomas Plath, drew up what was an exterior shape and the concept of using composite panels, lightweight fiberglass type panels that you can stamp, and said to Max, do you think you can make one of these? And these guys are heroes to me because they can just make cars in a few months. You can just drive them down the road, and I'm like, I would take years to do this sort of thing. So Max looks over and he says, yeah, sure, you give me sort of 3-4 months, I'll make that for you, no problem at all. So he's given this sort of rough idea, and then he returns back with the car as a fully drivable vehicle and an instruction manual how to make it as if they wanted, if they chose to put it in production. So this genius guy basically says, oh yeah, and here's the instruction manual, like a kit, you know, if you actually want to make it, that's how I made it, sort of thing.
The 2K2 also started with the latest 3 Series Coupe platform, but would be stripped back to make the 1,000 kilo weight limit. The interior they created was Spartan, at least for BMW standards of the day, but managed to thread the needle of being both stripped back and luxurious. Soon it was ready for a road test, fire extinguishers at hand.
So they took it up to the Aschheim test track, just down the road from the main engineering facility. And it's not fair to compare it to an M3, but it's fair enough to compare it to what was one of the sporty diesel models that they had at the time, the most powerful diesel. And because it had a lower rear axle ratio, it was really fast in acceleration. So it was really pretty quick. And because it was light, and it had a lower frontal area, it's aerodynamically quite good, it was more than competitive. You get a lot of performance, you also get a lot of agility with a light car. So it wasn't just the acceleration, it was the manner with which it got there, because it was so light. So everybody was just over the moon with the way it drove.
The 2K2 drove well, but what would happen next? The board took a look at the end of 1997 during another 7 Series review, and it was agreed to take a second pass at the shape, which would be put in the hands of Chris Chapman, the person who'd already done his own 2002 take 2 years earlier. Chris made a series of sketches, careful to show the bloodline between this shape and the original car. Even BMW North America got interested, if it could have a 6-cylinder engine, of course. but the 2K2 project was about to hit the rocks.
Well, there was one simple reality, which was Rover. So this was the very time when BMW was struggling to know what to do with Rover. And it had to figure out what to do in terms of investment. Do you invest money in a fairly low volume specialist BMW, or do you invest it in putting the money into a fairly high volume hatchback that will save, hopefully, this troubled Rover? And that's really what they decided to do. It was a nice to have, not a need to have. And they desperately needed to make the investment in Rover, and they didn't desperately need to have another cheaper version of the 3 Series.
BMW funded the R30 Rover hatchback into 1999, but things were coming to a head with BMW's British venture, and in 2000 both companies parted ways and the Rover R30 was never produced. It was now too late to make the 2K2 for the year 2002. After all, this was one project that had a very fixed deadline. But why didn't BMW take the current 3 Series Coupe, slap a 2002 badge on the back and sell it with a few special edition tweaks?
It's not their style. I mean, in some ways, BMW is obsessively true to itself. I mean, and this is praise, not criticism, but it might sound like it is. They do really overthink things sometimes, and they are really prone to self-analysis. And to them, their ethos is, if you're going to do it properly. And it's fair to say, if you're going to do that idea of a 2002 car, you need to be making that decision back in 1999, year 2000. That was back in the days of Rover. So it wasn't really a consideration at that time because, frankly, they had to worry about the day-to-day situation with Rover, which was hemorrhaging cash for them, of course. So I can see why they might have considered it very quickly in the meeting, but the purists in the company would say, let's hold.
Ironically, now that BMW was free of mass car maker Rover, they needed something for their own range that was smaller than the 3 Series, and as the 3 Series had grown substantially since it replaced the 02 Series, thoughts turned of what a small coupe might look like.
Imagine you go into a lull where Rover is then disposed of, and all of a sudden, BMW now has the freedom to introduce a car under the 3 Series, and the market's developing. And the new chief engineer was formerly the 3 Series engineering boss, and he said to Ralph Langmeier, pulled him to one side at this big corporate meeting off-site, and he said, "Is it time to do your car?" And Ralph said, "It's absolutely always time to do this car. Yes, we must do this car." The designers wanted it to be a coupe type 2-door, but the marketing people said, look, the volume is in the hatch. You're going to have to do a 5-door hatchback. And Chris Chapman, who really wanted to design a small compact coupe 02 type car, I don't want to do a 5-door. And so Chris Chapman was told by his boss, Chris Bangle, do a coupe, and if it wins, then you have to do the 5-door. But the 5-door, we'll fight with marketing, but maybe we'll have to do the 5-door first.
A concept was introduced as the CS1 in 2002.
Well, that was the car that introduced the 1 Series, but Chris Bangle thought it'd be a great idea to make it as convertible. That way it doesn't show off the roof, so you're not showing everything. But Chris, being a fairly creative thinker, thought, we'll trick all the press by making the car 5% smaller so that everybody thinks that the production of the car is going to be the same and it's going to be really cramped. But the problem was, he realized afterwards it was a bit of a bad idea because they had to redesign and redraw everything. So they had to design 2 cars that were identical in many respects, but 5% difference in size.
As expected, the 1 Series launched as a 5-door hatchback in 2004. It would take 3 years for the coupe to appear, and being 5 years after the 2002 deadline, it's no surprise it didn't sport a 2002 badge on the back. It was also a great deal faster than the original 2002, even the mad turbocharged version. That goes to show just how cars had changed in the span of 30 years. BMW would revisit the 2002 in 2016 with the 2002 Homage, a car BMW said was purely a design exercise that was designed to pay tribute to the 2002's race wins at Pebble Beach in California. It wasn't released in the year 2002, of course, but it celebrated 50 years of the original 2002. Unfortunately, like the 2K2, it didn't reach production. When researching for his BMW book set, Steve Saxty was very lucky to discover that the 2K2 prototype was still in BMW's collection.
So I thought, wow, that's quite a story that car's got to tell, but how do we tell the story without seeing the car? And so I made some inquiries at BMW Classic, and they said, yeah, I think we've got it in storage, actually. And I'm like, really? And they've got all these cars stored away, and that's a whole separate story. And I thought, oh. And the guy at BMW Classic knows my next question. He goes, well, would you like to see it then? Now, the problem is I live in New York, he's in Munich. I can't keep jumping over to see a car. And I said, well, yeah. He said, I'll take some photos for you with my phone if you like. And I can't really use, set of photos from someone's phone in a quality book sort of thing. So I then phoned up Adrian Van Hooydonk, the chief designer. I said, look, they're willing to get the 2K2 out of storage. And he said, that's great. He said, I didn't even know it still existed. I remember that thing. And I said, well, look, is there a chance that you can let me have one of your photographers shoot it properly? Because it deserves to be told well with some decent photos. He said, yeah, that's no problem at all.
Calling a BMW the 2002 in the year 2002 would be a very cool idea, but there is of course a problem when you get to the year 2003. Does the car suddenly seem out of date? Maybe that's why BMW's marketing people thought the 2K2 moniker would be better. But even then, the naming would have been out of step with BMW's other very logical Germanic system. The 2K2 is a glimpse at an alternative direction BMW could have taken in the late 1990s, but was stymied by its Rover misadventure. But the prototype is a worthy successor to the original 2002, a car revered even today, and both go to the core of BMW's philosophy of creating true driver's cars. Steve was very kind to share this story from his book BMW's Hidden Gems, where there is much more information about BMW's history. If you're interested, take a look at stevesaxty.com or check out the link in the description. If you want to see the full interview with Steve, then there's a link on the right. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.